Minions are an absolutely incredible build that are going to take you from the early game all the way into the end game. This setup is the setup that I played to beat the 6 acts of the campaign, and that I am now absolutely destroying maps with. I'm already on to tier 2 maps, and I'm very quickly today going to be going into tier 3 and 4 maps, and once I start trading, the power level of this build is just incredible. Minions have an insane amount of ability to scale, because they're scaling really hard with gem levels, maximum spirit, crit chance, crit damage. There's so many powerful multipliers that are going to scale your minions ridiculously hard, but the base stats of minions are so strong once you get slightly higher level gems, that you're going to be obliterating the end game before you even, obliterating the campaign before you even get all these multipliers. However, the downside of scaling really hard is at the very beginning, minions kind of suck. So this first section, we're going to be talking about how do you deal with Act 1 and early Act 2, pretty much until you get your Ascendancy. And then once you get your Ascendancy, we're going to be talking about what build to play and what to spend your Ascendancy points on. And then we're going to be finishing up by talking about the build that's going to take you from Cruel into the end game so you can start blasting. Now, disclaimer, there might be better builds that are discovered in the future. This is just the build that I personally played progressing through all this content, and I had a very easy and enjoyable time doing it. So I wanted to share that build with you, but especially the end game build. I'm going to be updating this build like crazy. This is just the beginning. Obviously, we're just getting started. So with that out of the way, let's start with level 1 through 20. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be playing a Contagion ED setup, where basically we use the Contagion to dot up the mobs, and then when the mob dies, it's going to spread all of your dots to surrounding enemies. So we're going to pair that with Essence Strain. This is going to be a very powerful combo for both AoE clearing and for bossing, as dots do tons of damage and they make bossing very easy. For our support gems, we're going to be running Magnified Effect on Contagion to increase the size of the AoE. Then we're going to be running Swift Affliction and Persistence on Essence Strain. Persistence to increase the duration, and then Swift Affliction will reduce the duration but give you a huge damage multiplier. We're also going to be running on Earth with Brutality and Martial Tempo, which Brutality is going to be a 35% multiplier on both the Unearth's cast and on the minions themselves, which is pretty cool. And then Martial Tempo is going to give more attack speed to the guys that you summon. And so basically, remember, whenever you unearth a mob that dies from Contagion, that unearthed minion is also going to get the Contagion, and it's going to spread it around. So that's really powerful for early game. And then we're going to go into Skeletal Snipers. And the Skeletal Snipers are really more of a early game option. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be tossing on a scepter. So you're going to be using one scepter and a wand. You need to make sure that the wand has Chaos Bolt so that you can properly kill bosses. Great single target ability, and you can get faster cast speed on that as a support gem, which will make it even better. And then run a Rattling Scepter to get out some warriors. And with that, plus the snipers, you'll get a little bit of extra damage early game, which is going to help you out a little bit, and it's going to help you start to scale into the mid game. Now, for the starting passive tree, it's actually going to look a little bit different on the website, because Witch has a different passive starting tree than the other classes. And so the first few nodes are going to look different on the website, but, they're just there to kind of signify what you're supposed to do. So we're going to be grabbing all of these spell and minion damage nodes that are going to scale both the spell damage and the minion damage, which is really powerful. We also luck out here as we're able to grab Raw Destruction for an intelligence boost, which allows us to keep equipping like new gear drops and stuff, while still giving us a nice damage multiplier. And then you really have two options. So you have to get the spell and minion damage node. If you feel like you're crushing and you're just kind of breezing through the game, you can just get the Power of the Dead node and just kind of go through, get into Act 2, and then start swapping to minions. But if you're feeling kind of weak and you need more early game power and you're okay with respecking later, then you want to go Chaos Damage and Entropy, because Entropy is going to give you increased duration on your dots, which is going to make bossing and mobbing quite a bit easier. And both of these are also going to give you more damage on your Contagion and Essence Drain. This is technically stronger when leveling, but you can go either way. That really is up to you. Now, around level 22 or 23, 24, something in that range, you're going to get your Ascendancy quest, and you're going to get it done, and you're going to get a Hellhound. The Hellhound is an incredible minion, as it's going to absorb 20% of incoming damage, but it's also going to enable a quite funny combo with Skeletal Snipers. So the Hellhound is going to ignite everything around it in an AoE, and then with the Sniper active, you can shoot a Poison Cloud onto an ignited enemy, and it'll immediately blow up, doing a burst of damage. This is a very small AoE damage, but it's enough to one-shot most mobs. So what we do is we pair that with Detonate Dead. And Detonate Dead is going to do percent bomb maximum health and a giant AoE around a corpse that you target. So what you're able to do is your Hellhound runs in, you activate the snipers, they shoot Poison Cloud on top of the Hellhound. It'll blow up the mobs very close to the Hellhound. Then you cast Detonate Dead, and then that kills the whole pack. That's the idea behind this build, and it's actually really powerful for leveling while still doing pretty well on bosses. Our main boss damage is going to be coming from a combination of skeletal snipers and Bone Storm. And Bone Storm is particularly good because the damage, the secondary effect, so you channel the Bone Storm, you shoot the things, and then you're going to get a secondary effect where the next time your minions attack it, they're going to get bonus damage. And that's going to scale with all your damage, all your minion damage nodes. So they're going to get quite a bit of power from this. And the Bone Storm itself actually does quite a bit of damage because, as we were talking about, we're getting tons of spell damage in the early part of the tree. And the other thing to keep in mind with Detonate Dead is multiplied by all of this as well. So we're going to be getting like an extra 40% damage or so on our Detonate Dead, which is going to make it a lot easier to reach the threshold where it's killing stuff. And it's going to be the same thing with Bone Storm, where Bone Storm actually does quite a bit of damage. And you can see why this is pretty potent. You've got a very powerful synergy for bossing, and you have fantastic AoE with Detonate Dead. Now, for our support gems, we're going to be looking to pick up gems that are very powerful now, but are going to transition into the later versions of the build. So we're going to be running Martial Tempo on the snipers for 25% attack speed, and then Last Gasp, so that after they die, they live for an extra 4 seconds. Now, when Last Gasp gets procced, the revive timer for your minions actually begins immediately. And so you're able to get much better uptime on your minions by running Last Gasp because, you know, the timer starts right when they die, so they come up very shortly after Last Gasp ends. On Bone Storm, we're running Arcane Tempo for increased cast speed because the faster you get these out, the more damage you do. It's quite simple. We also have Pain Offering. If you get lucky and you get Spirit Gear, it can be worth it to cast Pain Offering occasionally. And you want to target your snipers with it, and then we're going to be running increased duration so that it lasts longer. There's going to be a huge buff. The problem is, in the early game, you tend to not have enough minions, or they don't have enough stats to be worth casting Pain Offering. But if you get lucky with gear, it's worth it to run. And then Detonate Dead, like the core of our AoE, running Magnified Effect or increased AoE, and Fire Infusion as an extra damage multiplier. I do also kind of like running Raise Zombie. So if you find that you're fairly weak, especially like before you get the Hound, you can run Raise Zombie instead of Pain Offering. And if you do that, you want to put the Persistence Gem into Raise Zombie so that it has the increased duration, which is going to make it quite good. Now, in terms of pathing, you have some very important nodes that you need to get to in early Act 2 to really scale your minions. So we're going to be doing the same pathing, of course, and the difference is, from this intelligence node here, we're actually going to go straight up here to get Gravedigger and to get Necrotized Flesh. So Gravedigger is going to give you 15% increased revive time, so you're going to have much better uptime on your minions, and then Necrotized Flesh is going to give your minions 40% life. What's great about these percent life nodes is that the Hellhound actually scales with percent life, in terms of his AoE Ignite that he applies, which deals quite a bit of damage. So getting life nodes not only makes your minions live longer, but it's also going to make your Hellhound do more damage. With regards to the Hellhound, we currently can't put them into the skill tree on Mobilytics, so I just want to show you real quick here. You're going to be running a Meat Shield for your support gem, which is going to make them do less damage, but it's going to give him more maximum life. And because he does damage based on his maximum life, this actually increases the damage of the Ignite while making him way tankier. And remember, his survivability is very important because he's absorbing incoming damage from you, where he absorbs 20% of damage you take from hits. Swift Affliction is another damage multiplier that's going to give you less duration on your ailments, but make them do more damage. But because the Hellhound is constantly applying them, it's going to deal like that full damage constantly. Now, with the snipers, you actually want to transition as soon as you get Reavers and drop snipers and add Reavers instead, still running Martial Tempo and Last Grasp. You're going to lose the Poison Arrow combo with your Hellhound, but the damage increase is really massive, especially in single target, so it's definitely worth it to swap to Reapers. And now we're going to talk about the kind of early in-game build, like, you know, Cruel difficulty and beyond. Now, as you get deeper into the game, you're going to unlock new super powerful minions like the Skeletal Brute, who just has a ridiculous amount of health, a ridiculous amount of damage, and the ability to do a huge chunk of AoE. These brutes, and from my testing, seem to just be better than Reavers. The Reavers might be better once you get a lot of stuff to like work with their active, but in general, as like a generic unit, I think the Brute is quite a bit better. So we're going to be swapping into Brutes. However, because you're going to be getting more and more spirit as you play, and you get more and more minions, one of the problems you're going to run into is that your minions are just going to start body blocking each other, and the melee dudes aren't going to be able to get in. You're really going to be noticing this in certain maps, like the final map on Act 3, which is crazy painful with a melee army comp. So even if you're still In Act 2, sometimes you're going to need to drop the Reavers and put in skeletal snipers just to have AoE because your Reavers literally can't attack because the hallways are too small. So with that in mind, this in-game setup is designed to work on every map while still having good boss damage. It won't have the same brute power that, like, you know, the more like starter minion or like a pure brute army would have, but it's just much more consistent and much easier to play. However, it does require quite a bit of spirit. So the core guy is the brute. We're going to be running 2 brutes. I think 2 brutes plus a hellhound is plenty of melee for like getting aggro and everything. They do loads of damage. They frontline for you, but it's not so many that if they get stuck on each other, you like lose like a ton of damage, right? And 3 is the small enough number that they usually don't get stuck on each other. So with our brute, we're running martial tempo and we're running heavy swing. You want your brutes to do tons of damage so that they can stagger monsters, because once they get the stagger proc, he's gonna do like this like uppercut hit with the mace, which does a huge AoE chunk of damage. It's really powerful and really cool. Now the second new piece of the build is going to be the skeletal arsonist. He is going to be running feeding frenzy to do 30% more damage and take 20% less damage, and he's gonna be running scatter shot so that he shoots multiple grenades. What makes him so powerful is he's gonna throw grenades. Their grenades are going to hit and they're going to explode and do AoE damage. Scattershot allows your grenades to overlap with each other, so enemies that are in the sweet spot will be getting hit by multiple grenades at a time. This is quite powerful and very effective when paired with Flame Wall. So, Flame Wall, you put on the ground, and whenever the grenades go through the Flame Wall, they're going to get ignited and they're going to do bonus damage. And that damage actually ends up being quite a bit because it's going to scale. Similar to Bone Storm, it's going to scale with minion damage multipliers. Then we're running Raging Spirits. So whenever we cast Flame Wall, we're going to get a bunch of dudes that are going to come out and start attacking stuff. This means this combo is quite powerful. And because of the Raging Spirits Flame Wall combo, even though the Arsonists do less damage to bosses, the Raging Spirit Flame Wall combo makes up for it. And it actually allows you to be somewhat competitive with pure brute in terms of boss damage, while having pretty good AoE and a much more consistent mapping experience. We're also still running Detonate Dead in this build because it's going to do ridiculous damage as it scales off of mobs' maximum health. At this point, we're going to be running with Magnified Effect to make the AoE bigger, and Spell Echo, which will allow it to double cast, and the double casted effect will have increased AoE. What's cool about this is if you kill one mob and cast Detonate Dead, it'll explode, and if that explosion kills a mob, or if there's any dead mob around it, it'll immediately cast Detonate Dead again with an even bigger AoE. This is a really powerful combo that ends up doing a ton of damage. Now, we need to talk about Pain Offering and Skeletal Cleric. Skeletal Cleric is a very powerful unit because he's able to res your minions every 2 seconds, and he's able to put out a ginormous heal that is a heal over time effect that he can put out on most of your army at once. And when you give him Arcane Tempo for cast speed, he can really get it out on everybody. And what he's really going to do, the real reason we're running it, is to keep up Pain Offering. Pain Offering is a ginormous damage multiplier for your minions because it gives them attack speed and more damage. The downside is it's very squishy, so it tends to die. However, with the cleric, healing it is much more likely to survive. He's also going to keep your arsonist alive when you're bossing because the boss can be quite punishing on the arsonist, especially because they're taking 30% increased damage. And the occasional time that your brutes would actually die, he keeps them alive as well. I think on average, the cleric is probably slightly worse than just running another arsonist, but he makes the pain points of the build so much easier that I think it's worth it to run him. For the final section of the video, I'm going to talk about stats on gear and what you should really be looking for. So for the first thing we're going to talk about is damage stats. Now, the most important thing you're going to be looking for is your scepter. You need minion ranks and you need maximum spirit. Once you have those 2 rolls, you're going to be looking for add physical damage and double crit. That would be the perfect scepter. Like, allies in your presence gain crit chance, allies in your presence gain crit damage. This is a very crit orientated build. We're getting all of the crit minion passives in the in-game version. Now, okay, keep in mind, if you're playing one of the first 2 versions of the build, you don't necessarily need to listen to this part, but playing the in-game version, you need to get the scepter that applies the crit debuff, which is called the Omen Scepter. This debuff is going to actually additively add to your base crit chance of your minions. So by default, they only have 5% crit chance, but with this, they go all the way up to 15%, which makes all of your crit chance nodes scale ridiculously hard. As part of this, you need to make sure that you're staying relatively close to bosses to make sure you're applying the debuff, but it's well worth it. This is where a ton of your damage is coming from. On your helmet, it's really important that you get ranks of minion skills. Ranks of minion skills is ludicrously good because it's not only going to reduce the spirit cost of your minions, but it's also going to increase their health and damage. This is a huge damage multiplier and a huge survivability multiplier for your minions as well. On your chest piece, you're looking for spirit. It's very hard to find spirit, but if you find it, then put it on. It's amazing. And we're also going to be running a shield. What makes the shield so good is the inherent block chance actually represents a ton of damage reduction, and the shield itself can roll fantastic things like, you know, max elemental resistance, max life, etc. Shields are just really powerful and definitely recommend running them. Remember, in general, I didn't really get into the defensive setup of this build in this video because it's not super important to understand. But what we're going for is an ES armor build where we're converting a ton of physical damage to other types. So when we get hit, we're converting 20% of the physical damage to chaos and 20% of the damage going to Hellhound, which makes armor crazy effective. And then we're getting a ton of ES and we're multiplying ES, and I'll talk about all this in a later video. But in general, just look for armor ES gear, run a shield, and get as many resistances as you can for scaling your character defensively. Offensively, you're looking for a scepter with the god rolls of minion skills, spirit, helmet, minion ranks, chest, spirit. And that's pretty much going to do it for today's video. So remember, this is just kind of like an overview. This is a getting started, blasting it to endgame. I'm going to make a way more refined endgame guide in the next few days, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, hopefully you guys are enjoying the game as much as I am, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out, everybody.